Let's go. Mac Malone, he's your KC journalist. The truth. Mac Malone, he's your KC journalist. Mac Malone, he's your KC journalist. And y'all get the best from that KC journalist. Let's go.
Yo, what's the deal, everybody? This your boy Mac Malone, the KC journalist, and today we are down at 2900 Gillum Road. This right here was the Greenlease Cadillac dealership. It sat right here at 2900 Gillum Road. It's a historic building. So Robert Greenlease Sr., at a young age, he became interested in automobiles and motorized vehicles. At age 21, he invented an automobile he called the Kansas City Hummer, because it hummed when it drives. But only 4 vehicles ended up being built, and it ended up, due to lack of motorized vehicle interest at that time, they were still kind of new, it just kind of bombed out. In 1908, he acquired the first Cadillac franchise west of the Mississippi, and this was the original building right here. It ended up moving later on. The Cadillac became part of the General Motors, and the cars started flying off the lots, and he became one of the largest individual stockholders in General Motors. In the 1940s, he loaned $1 million just so General Motors would expand, $1 million of his own money. And as the Greenlease Cadillac Company advanced, so did the knowledge of the Greenlease wealth, and everybody knew he was a millionaire, and the word started spreading, and this is where our story starts. This is where Carl Hall comes into it. Carl Hall was son of a successful lawyer. After his parents died, he received a substantial inheritance and the family's 1,100-acre property in Pleasanton, Kansas. But he ended up selling the property and leaving town. He got married, but he ended up divorced and squandered his money. He got divorced and became an alcoholic and morphine addict. He robbed a cab driver of $38 and went to the Missouri State Penitentiary. Now, while he was incarcerated, he dreamed of a big score. He got out of prison. He moved to St. Joe, where he met Bonnie, and she too had a sizable inheritance from her father. But her first husband was a bank robber who had got killed by police, and she had just divorced her second husband a year before meeting Hall. They met in a bar in St. Joe. Carl quickly moved in with Bonnie. I think it was like 2 days later he moved in with her, and he told her about his scheme. Hall had met Greenlease's son Paul in a military school in Boonville, and that's when he learned about the family fortune and the Greenlease and everything they were doing. So the summer of '53, Hall and Hetty came back to Kansas City, and they followed the Greenlease family around to learn their daily travel patterns and their schedules. The first initial target was their 11-year-old daughter, but then they determined that Bobby was the easier target because he was smaller, he'd be easier to subdue, and he'd probably be more docile. And on September 28, 1953, they executed that plan. We're about to go to the school where it all happened. Let's go. And here we are at the Notre Dame de Sion school that Bobby attended. And you know, this part of it really freaks me out because nowadays you got to be like on a list to get kids and be approved, and the parents know who has the right to get the kids. You know, there's lots of security precautions in the school. So nowadays this probably wouldn't have worked. But nonetheless, around 11 a.m. September 28, 1953, Bobby got up and came to school like he does every day. Just a normal day in the Greenlease household. Around 11 a.m., Bonnie Hetty, she shows up in a cab, and she went into the school pretending to be upset and tells them that Bobby's mother had a heart attack and she was ordered to come get Bobby. And the nun was sympathetic. She thought nothing of it. She went and got Bobby. She told Bobby his aunt was here. They didn't tell him about his mother, though. But Bobby walked right up to Bonnie without sounding any alarms or anything suspicious going on, so the nun assumed everything was okay. And she watched them leave in a cab. She had no idea that this was the last time she would see Bobby alive. But after 30 minutes went by, and the nun from the school calls Bobby's house to check on his mother's condition. And to her horror, she learns that nothing happened and now Bobby has been abducted. Everybody starts freaking out. So Bobby gets in the cab with Bonnie, and they head to the Cat store. The Cat's drugstore that was on Westport in Maine. But I came to this side of the school. They built onto it, but this right here was the old side of the school, so they would have came out these doors right here. So Bobby and Bonnie, they leave the school in a cab and they go to the Cat's drugstore to meet up with Carl Hall. Once they get there, they climb in the car with Carl and they head to a remote part of land in Overland Park, Kansas. I've read that it was a farm of some kind. On the way, they carried on conversations with Bobby. They were just gathering information about his life, talking about his home, asking him about his pets, just trying to keep him comfortable. They even stopped to get him some ice cream. They was just playing it up, they didn't want to alarm him at all. And, they arrive at the location, and as soon as they arrive at the location, Bonnie gets up and she gets out of the car and she walks away. I guess, I've read a lot that she was drunk all the time, or maybe she just didn't want to see it, but she knew what was going to happen. So as soon as Bonnie walked away, Carl reached in his pocket and grabbed a rope and tried to strangle Bobby with it, but Bobby fought back. Carl got frustrated and hit him a couple times, hit him so hard that he knocked one of his teeth out. And then he finally pushed Bobby to the ground, fired 2 shots, missing the first one, but the second one struck Bobby in the head, killing him. Then they wrapped Bobby's body up in a bag and headed to Bonnie's house in St. Joe. So they took Bobby to Bonnie's house. This is what it looks like today. It sits at 1201 South 38th Street. If you look at this driveway, it curves around. This is where they drove in. It curves around and goes into the garage. And this is how they carried Bobby's body into the house. They took it out back by the back porch, this spot where the X is right here, and they buried him and planted a flower bed on top of him to try to disguise it as a flower bed. But there's a tree there today. But if you look right here where this X is where they found the body. So then after they buried Bobby, they went back to Kansas City to negotiate the ransom. They arrived back in Kansas City and they started calling the family, started dropping ransom notes. Over a half dozen ransom notes were dropped. Over 15 phone calls were made over a period of a week. I'm going to take you to the spot right now. We're at the Mount Olive Baptist Church. This spot right here is where one of the ransom notes were found. So if you look right here at the bottom, you can see that there used to be a window there that's sealed up right now. And one of the ransom notes was dropped in that window. And like I said, there was over a half dozen notes and 15 calls. But then the Greenlees finally got the money together, and then they headed to the drop. I'm about to take you to the spot where the money was dropped off and they dropped the ransom. Let's go. So here we are at the spot where the ransom money was dropped. Robert Greenlees contacted Arthur Eisenhower, who was the brother of Dwight Eisenhower at the time, and they pulled the money from the federal banks. On October 5th, 1953, the money was dropped off at this bridge right here in a duffel bag. Hall stated that he was parked down the street and he watched the Greenlees Cadillac pass by. He then went to this bridge and located the bag. He had demanded $600,000 in $20 and $10 bills. So after the money was dropped, Hall and Hetty headed back 380 miles to St. Louis without a plan. The final call came at 1 a.m. October 5th. Hall stated that he had received the money and to stand by for instructions on how to pick Bobby up. Hall and Hetty rented this apartment right here in St. Louis. Hall stated that Bonnie was getting on his damn nerves, and so when she passed out, he left her $2,000. He took the other rest of the $600,000 off to the Merrimack River to bury the money, but ultimately he brought it back with him. Briefly, Hall was on top of the world. He had the money and the booze. It made him act so stupid it made the cab driver suspicious, and he reported Hall to the police. He dropped Hall off at this hotel at the Coral Court Motel. And on October 6th, police showed up and quickly linked Carl to the kidnapping. Hall ratted out Bonnie and police arrested her at this apartment on Arsenal Street. Now we're going to head to the grave of Bobby and his father and conclude this story. So here we are at the grave of Bobby and Robert Sr. Now when Hall was arrested, police found $288,000 of the ransom money. Arresting officers Louis Shoulders and Elmer Dolan were indicted for perjury and sentenced to 2 and 3 years in prison. I had to go get a key to get in here. Look at this. This is just gorgeous. So anyway, the rest of the money was never recovered. Police were led back to the house and Bobby was found at 8:40 a.m. on October 7th. This trial and execution went by fast. Both parties entered a guilty plea on October 30th. On November 19th, the jury deliberated for an hour and sentenced them both to death. They were both sat side by side in the Missouri State Penitentiary gas chamber and executed on December 18th. Both were pronounced dead after midnight, less than 3 months after the kidnapping. This right here is the grave of Bobby and his father. His sister is also buried in here. This was a sad story, man. A friend of mine told me about this, and it's crazy. These are some beautiful graves, though. This was a tragic story. This your boy Mac Malone, the KC Journalist, signing out from Kansas City. Rest in peace to Bobby Greenlease. I'm about to get up out of here.
Let's go. Mac Malone, he's your KC Journalist. The truth. Mac Malone, he's your KC Journalist. Mac Malone, he's your KC Journalist. And y'all get the best from that KC Journalist.